Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. As you probably remember, we are proudly invited here for a conference that couldn't have happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we had a little pandemic, a little bit Corona, a little bit COVID-19. Everything was shut down, and in that time, I changed jobs from a Swiss bank in London to a medical device company in Cologne. That was a huge change for me, not only personal, but also from a security point of view. Coming from a well-organized bank, well, it's Swiss anyway, or it was Swiss, to an American company which had grown organically from different companies with different IT departments, a security structure that was under development. So a lot of changes, and I was happy to do a lot of observations and a couple of lessons learned, not only for a pandemic, but also for other disasters and other things that might have happened. A little bit about ZOLL. ZOLL is now 40 years old. It was built by Dr. ZOLL, who was the inventor of the first external defibrillator. That is the device you rub together and then put onto the chest of a patient, and then it goes thump, and you provide an electric shock. That was 40 years ago. Now it's a little bit more advanced. The devices have developed, getting more intelligent, getting more sophisticated, up to a point that you can now hand over a defibrillator in an emergency to any bystander. It gets oral instructions how to apply the electrodes, how to step back, and how to apply the electric shock and revive a person. With that, a lot of data is collected from the monitoring. We provide external defibrillators for patients that are waiting for an implant or are waiting to get better, so they don't need any implant and external monitoring anymore. That collects a lot of data, both on the device and on central locations we use for monitoring. So if a patient has a heart attack or a cardiac arrest, actually, they will get first an electric shock from the device, and we will receive an alert, and then we can call an emergency services or call a patient's contact and find out what's happening. So that's what we do. And somewhere in between all that data is my position. I'm actually responsible for protecting ZOLL. I'm the good guy going after the bad guys, doing security analytics, incident response, investigations, and try to improve the security posture and the security situation. So what happens in a pandemic? What is a pandemic? Huge infection, everybody is afraid. So what does the government do? Any government. Panic. Then they provide some public information campaign. They say how hard it is, how bad it is, what people should do. They try to prevent further infection by isolating people. They try to prevent people from meeting and infecting other people, traveling, and they try to identify infected people. Tests in the UK, where I lived at the time, whenever you were traveling international, you had to provide a test both before leaving the country and coming back. In Germany, it was similar. If you have an infection, they try to trace your contacts. Basically, what we all do or should do is by limiting the exposure to a virus. Could be any virus. Influenza is probably next. So then we isolate people. Social distancing, the easiest one. Try to keep the distance. In a shopping queue, 5 meters, 4 meters in UK. If we find out that a person is not well, we try to quarantine them. And if they're actually sick, they're going to be in isolation, either at home or if it's necessary in a hospital, in an intensive care unit sometimes. And all these steps, all this isolation have a direct impact on the business because people can't travel to work, people can't sit in an office. So what's going to happen? Who's coming to work? Basically everybody who is handling people in hospital. You can't say to a nurse, no, you're going to stay at home. Or you can't say to a doctor, no, you're staying at home, you are healthy, you need to work. Unless they're infected. And there were a lot of nurses, doctors, and other medical personnel infected, unfortunately. Doctors, dentists, public transport. You can't change the location if you're handling items and goods. Delivery, manufacturing. I can't put the 1-ton drilling machine in my living room. Probably it's not suitable for that. Special equipment. Well, I could put a microscope into my living room, but not a complete chemical or biochemical lab. Food production. A farmer can't change his location. He needs to go to the field. He needs to go and meet his animals and to his cows. Distribution and delivery. You need to provide people with food. You need delivery. In the UK, it was very hard because if you order from a supermarket, then the delivery driver came to your door, put down all the bags, rang the doorbell or knocked on the door, and then stepped away because of isolation. I think it was similar here in Germany. Shops and supermarkets were quite restricted, only a certain amount of people, keeping distance, sometimes not even cash allowed. You need to pay per card. Also people who are doing paper-based administration. They can't change the location because they need to access the paper. You can't courier confidential documents around London or around Leipzig and expect people to pick them up. Manual work, construction work, repair, farming, agriculture. All these people need to go to their location of work and need to do their work there. So they're going to meet in the office. Who's going to work from home? Everyone else, if they have work. So most of the people handling digital information were working from home. Administration, just checking emails, doing spreadsheets, no physical objects involved, no physical documents, but also schools and universities were learning about online training, probably sometimes for the first time, with great expectations and great surprise. I've learned from my nephew here in Germany that it was very hard to get a school to do an online training or online classes because the teacher at that time didn't want to work in front of the computer. Well, that changed. So, observations. If you don't have a plan, it's now time to start with one. Try to work out a proper plan. Try to test it. And if you don't know what you're doing, try to learn. On-site business requires on-site workers. I think that's a given. If you need to work in an office, on a shop floor, on a manufacturing floor, you need to be there. Even with the best automation, you need someone to look after the products and making sure that everything automated runs nicely. Office rotation, great idea. You have shifts, that travel 1 week to the office, the other shift travel the second week, third week, and so on. That works if you can actually travel. If no public transport, then you have a problem. We experienced that in London, where the tube was limited and basically you couldn't travel anywhere. Quite nice experience if you like walking or long distance cycling, but we quickly learned that we need to do home office. Also, a disaster recovery site. Some companies have a special office location for disaster recovery where people have some computers, terminals, some equipment they could use. It's not just another office location. And some disaster recovery sites are way out in the countryside where probably a disaster doesn't strike. You need to travel there. And if you don't have any transport, you can't travel. If you do large-scale remote working, like in a pandemic, where everybody suddenly needs to work from home, you need to have sufficient resources. Internet, VPN licenses, internet connectivity on both sides. It doesn't really work if you have just a dial-up and thinking, okay, that might be sufficient to or a DSL line that's sufficient to send out our emails, and suddenly 200, 400 people try to dial into the VPN. It's just doing crap. Remote working requires remote support, which is a big surprise to some people. Usually, if you work in an office, you have your IT people. Sometimes you have a dedicated help desk, people strolling by, asking, I have that problem with my mouse, can you change it? Or I need a new monitor. And suddenly your help desk is a couple of 100 miles away, distributed, and your monitor, well, good luck with that. Not working. And from an observational point of view, not every person is ready for remote working, long-term remote working. People need contact, they need the friendly chat, and if they don't get these contacts, they mentally collapse. Unfortunately, it happened a couple of times in my company, and we could try to do our best. And for security, where does our attack surface end and expand when you suddenly leave the traditional working environment? Is the desk of the remote worker included? Is Wi-Fi network at home? Where does the Wi-Fi network expand? We heard that before in the presentation. Do we have some kind of security measures and security controls over that particular home network? Especially if you're bring your own devices. Also, physical security is an issue. If you live in a shared accommodation, share your flat with a couple of people, probably have your own bedroom, small one, but not enough space for a desk. So you move into the living room or the kitchen, set up your laptop, and hey, do you mind if I just put my laptop next to you? So that's a shared environment, but not very secure. And that also implies data privacy issues. How do I protect the data that the home worker is usually working on? Medical data in some cases, financial data, from observant eyes, someone looking over his shoulder. It's already bad in the office. But at home it could be quite a disaster if some medical data is suddenly published or leaked. That defines the boundaries? What are the interests between the privacy and business? Where does the privacy of the home worker start and where does it stop? Do I monitor what he or she is doing by camera, switch on the camera when it starts a shift and switch it off when it ends? Do I keep that running? Some company tries that and just got a slap on the wrist from the data protection officers. Some companies still tried, especially in the banking sector, where monitoring, for example, of traders is mandatory, but it turned out that some of the regulations were then not observed and were not observable, to be honest. We already heard what happens if the home network is insecure. What happens if I put a company laptop in an insecure network full of viruses and worms? Or even worse, if I start the company network on a bring your own device that is infected, and the viruses are propagating through the VPN or through a split tunnel. So what worked and what didn't? Already mentioned, early planning is good. Early planning and exercises. Test your plans, make sure that they're actually working, and making sure that everybody understands what the plans are, what are the business processes that require on-site working, and what are the business processes that you can assign to remote working. Some processes require on-site working, signatures, but also manufacturing. Some business processes just require an internet connection and an email account and an Excel sheet. Design your remote access properly. Understand what the people need to do, understand what you can provide and what's required, and then design it properly. It doesn't really help if you need to shift thousands of gigabytes of files around just to have someone have a look and you have only a small internet connection, or even worse, the other guy is on dial-up. Proper equipment for proper remote working. I think that's a given. If you need to work remotely, you can either run on a mobile phone, as we have heard, but I think there are certain limitations in the visibility and how much you can actually see on a mobile phone and how much you can work. I don't want to run Excel sheets on a smartphone, even if it's possible. And I certainly don't want to run database work on an iPad. Regular virtual meetings to keep up morale, to help people understand what's going on. For remote workers, it's virtually really important to understand what's going on. Otherwise, they feel like Robinson on a remote island and they just work on and on and on without interfacing with the business and without interfacing with their colleagues. Even worse, if you have dedicated shift work that are just box ticking exercises, as I call it, run through a playbook, run through some scenarios, fill out Excel sheets, fill out database entries. After a while, you're getting so bored that you switch off and don't regard anything security related, don't regard anything business related. You just want to get your job done, and that's short before burnout. What didn't work? Surprisingly, buying equipment during a pandemic is a little bit hard. You can't just walk into MediaMarkt or Saturn and try to get a new laptop and a new monitor. In the UK, we had Currys or Dixons or PC Warehouse. No, they ran out on the first day, and even on Amazon, there was a waiting list of several weeks. So if you prepare for remote working, prepare early, making sure that everyone who needs to do remote working in your DR plans, in your business continuity plan, have the proper equipment. Either bring your own device or a company-issued device. Already mentioned, remote working requires a remote connection. I think that's pretty much given. And the more you need to transfer data, the more speedier the connection needs to be and the more bandwidth you require. Quite obvious. If you're sitting out in the countryside and have only dial-up or 1 meg connection, video conferencing are a little bit spotty. And TV streaming is, well, one of the things that may come later. Sometimes you need to look on how many people do I need to support. Do I have enough instances for the VPN? If I have 100 user license and 1,000 people, then I have a problem, or I need to tell 900 people, no, you don't need to work. Not now, perhaps later. Network access routing, especially for special VPNs, remote terminal connections. Some ISPs are a little bit iffy and a little bit sketchy when it comes to some of the remote connections. They try to block traffic because that thing might be hacking traffic. That's what you need to consider and what you need to test. Already mentioned, IT security at home is not always a given. And security, hygiene, and security awareness is a huge topic. You need to teach people what is security, why are we doing that? And if you're sitting at home, your kids are running around, the last thing you are concerned about is IT security. You're concerned about your kids playing with your laptop and making sure that they don't drop it, which is a security issue if it drops and crashes. But you're not looking at some phishing emails from your CFO asking you to pay an invoice for a supplier that they just received and is unpaid for 3 months. Result-driven work versus time tracking. That's a part of the workforce encouragement. People are much freer at home with their timekeeping. They don't stamp in and out on regular times unless they really have to. But it's quite easy to say, okay, we need that and that delivered. But we don't need to control every step you take unless it's really mandated by law or by regulation. We learned that in the banking sector, where some procedures were either result-driven, so we need to provide some reports at a certain time, and where some procedures were mandated to follow step by step and tick for tick box. Auditing, for example, is great for that. You go through an audit list and then check, check, check. If you're doing that for 4 weeks without any human interaction, you're getting mad for an auditor. So, from a long discussion, pandemic is just business continuity. Is it? Who thinks that's just business continuity? No, it's not. It is part of special case. Question is, can you do office rotation when it's required? Do you have the people planned to work in shifts or in groups and come into the office every second week? Can you do that from your business processes? How do you distribute your equipment if the office is closed and can't be reached? Do you have a courier, or do you plan in advance and say, okay, you get a laptop and a monitor to work from home if it's required? What happens to a printer? Some people need printouts. How to fix broken equipment? Big question. Do you have laptops, monitors, mouses, keyboards in a storeroom and just courier them out or have them ready for pickup? Or do you have a supplier who might have them in the storeroom, but they are not reachable because they are on the other side of the country, or even a third country, or even somewhere in another state? How do you connect back to the company network? That's one of the big questions, technical questions. What kind of applications do you need? What are they requiring? Can I use just a portal with the application running in a virtual machine? Or do I need transfer data across a VPN? Remote desktop. Quite good sometimes, but very bad if you need to transfer data. A not unimportant question is, what do the contracts say about remote working or remote working from home? And does the regulation allow that? Certain data can't leave the premises, medical data, for example, unless a lot of authorities and a lot of regulators agree to. Some banking data can't leave the premises or the country. So if you have someone sitting on a nice chateau in France and trying to log into a London bank, are they allowed to see the data? No, they don't. Another question for the home workers: do you have enough space at home? Do you have a dedicated office room, a dedicated desk to put up your laptop or your monitor on your computer? Or are you taking the kitchen table? Or, well, Starbucks is closed, so you can't move around. You need to sit somewhere, put up your computer, and just want to make sure that you have the right internet connection. Disaster recovery. The never-ending story of disasters, and what do we learn, if we learn anything. Identify the required systems. What is important for your business? What systems do you need? Email, of course. File servers, databases. Do you need your alarm system or your access control system? What happens if your fire alarm suddenly goes off and the fire brigade is in front of your empty office? And how do you control it? Do you have remote access into that? Okay, I'm going to close up. So you need to define the internal, external dependencies. Are your alternative vendors required for third-party suppliers? Where are the system located? And finally, as a summary, prepare, plan before the event, making sure that everything is in place. Have short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans and actions, and making sure that you have tested them, that you're running through them, and then you should be safe. Thank you very much. A little bit overtime.